Do you remember when mornings sounded like the radio before they sounded like anything else? That soft music floating down the hallway before your feet ever touched the floor? When the gentle crackle of the dial meant the house was waking up and the day was starting quietly, without alarms, without rushing, without the world already asking something from you? Maybe you remember lying still for just a moment, listening to those voices and melodies come through the walls, feeling the promise of the day waiting on the other side of your bedroom door. Maybe your shoes were already lined up near the doorway, laces tucked neatly inside, waiting for small hands that still moved a little slowly in the morning. Maybe your backpack leaned against a wall, heavy with notebooks, pencils, and folded homework, ready for another walk into a place that shaped more of you than you realized at the time. And maybe you still remember that exact thin creak of the screen door, that soft metallic sigh as it opened and closed, a sound that meant it's time to go. Outside, the neighborhood felt gently awake. Sun poured through tree branches onto quiet sidewalks. Dew glistened on clipped grass, and screen doors opened up and down the block as other kids stepped out for the day too. Faces you still remember, sneakers scraping concrete beside you, shy morning waves to neighbors sipping coffee on porches, and in the distance, the low rumble of a school bus rolling through the streets, brakes sighing as it slowed, the door folding open like the gateway into another small chapter of your growing world. You probably remember pausing for just a moment, adjusting your straps, taking one last look back toward your house, before stepping forward into the day. Because school mornings in the 1950s weren't just about getting to class. They were about entering a world where routines built confidence, where neighbors felt like guardians, where childhood unfolded one simple step at a time. And whether you walked every day, or waited on that yellow bus, or piled into a neighbor's station wagon, you carried the same feeling with you, a quiet mix of excitement, a little nervous energy, and the warm safety of knowing you weren't alone. Maybe your mother stood in the doorway as you left, hands resting on her apron, calling out a final reminder about your lunch or your jacket. Maybe your father folded the morning paper as the door shut behind you, already heading off to work, offering just a nod or a wave that somehow meant everything. And maybe you didn't know it then, but those calm departures were forming memories strong enough to last a lifetime, because life was slower then. Slower in the way small routines mattered, slower in the way neighborhoods looked out for children, slower in the way mornings unfolded without rush, one sound at a time. No buzzing phones, no blaring alarms, just the radio drifting down quiet hallways, footsteps on familiar floors, backpacks pulled onto young shoulders, and the world opening gently in front of you. And today, we're not just talking about history. We're walking straight back into your childhood classroom, back to chalk dust settling into sunlit air, back to wooden desks lined in perfect rows, back to the pledge recited with hands pressed to small chests, back to recess bells echoing across playgrounds filled with laughter, back to lunches unwrapped from brown paper sacks, back to the teacher whose voice you still remember, even if you can't place the name anymore, back to moments that shaped you long before you ever realized they mattered. But before we go any further together, Before we step fully through those classroom doors, if even a single part of this morning sounds familiar to you, leave a simple "I remember" in the comments below, because every memory you share keeps this time alive and helps someone else realize they were part of it too. And as we walk forward now, you may be surprised just how much your heart still remembers about the world you grew up in. Chapter 1. Walking to School. You remember how the sidewalk felt under your feet, the faint roughness of brick or concrete through thin soles, the soft scuff of leather shoes keeping time with your heart as each step carried you closer to school and farther from home, just a little at a time. There was something powerful about that walk, not just the distance, but what it meant. It was the first taste of independence most of us ever knew. You didn't need a ride. You didn't need grown-ups hovering nearby. All you needed was your backpack, your lunch sack folded tight at the top, and the quiet confidence that the world outside your front door belonged to you. Maybe your shoes sat crooked by the threshold where you slipped them on each morning. Maybe your hands smelled faintly of soap as you tied the laces with fingers still stiff from the cool air. And maybe you remember the click of the screen door behind you, the sound that said your day had officially begun. The neighborhood always felt different at that hour. The streets were calm. The air still held on to night's last quiet breath. Lawns shimmered with morning dew, each blade of grass ticking with tiny water drops that caught the early sunlight like scattered glass. Porch lights were just beginning to turn off. Windows glowed dimly behind lace curtains where parents moved about kitchens, packing lunches, buttoning coats, pouring one more cup of coffee before the rush. You stepped onto the sidewalk, and that was when you started to look for familiar faces. Do you remember who waited at your corner each day? Maybe it was your best friend down the block, already there when you arrived, swinging a lunch pail by the handle, toes scuffing the pavement while pretending not to be eager for company. Or maybe you were the one who waited, watching the street, counting the seconds, wondering if today would be the day someone didn't show. Was there always that one friend who ran late, the one who came sprinting at the last second, backpack bouncing, papers nearly sliding loose, waving wildly while yelling your name across the block? That moment, that tiny ritual of waiting and reuniting, was its own kind of magic. Because suddenly, the walk wasn't just your journey anymore, it was ours. You fell into step beside one another, leather shoes clacking together on brick sidewalks that wound past white picket fences and trimmed hedges. Book straps pulled tight across small shoulders bounced with every step. Lunch bags crinkled softly against wool sweaters and pressed jackets. Some kids carried metal lunch boxes with bright pictures on the front. Cowboys, rocket ships, cartoon creatures frozen in heroic poses. Others folded brown paper sacks at the top and squeezed them under their arms like fragile treasure. Inside waited peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices wrapped in wax paper, maybe a cookie that never quite made it to lunchtime without at least one stolen nibble. The neighborhood itself felt like a friendly companion on the walk. Front doors creaked open as neighbors stepped out to grab newspapers from the edge of their lawns. Mothers sweeping porches paused to wave. Fathers leaving for work tipped their caps as you passed. You waved back, sometimes shyly, sometimes with both hands raised high, feeling seen, known, and strangely safe. Every few houses brought a new greeting. "Morning, kids. Don't forget your coats. Be good at school today." And even if some voices belonged to grown-ups whose names you didn't know, they were part of your world anyway, because the neighborhood watched over you. There were no phones in small pockets tracking every step, no GPS blinking reassurance to anxious parents, just trust. Trust in sidewalks and routines, trust in porch watches and crossing guards, trust in the invisible thread connecting every door on the street. Life was slower then, and safety didn't come from alarms or locks. It came from familiarity. As the group grew, more kids joined from side streets and driveways, bicycles clinking softly beside walkers, bells chiming as someone coasted to the curb to wait for friends before riding on. Stop signs marked the rhythm of the journey. You halted at the corners, lining up shoulder to shoulder, eyes scanning the roads in practiced unison. A tiny classroom of traffic safety before school had even begun. Sometimes a crossing guard waited there, stiff in their bright sash, whistle hanging loose at their chest. You felt important, being helped across, stepping into the street like you were a part of something official. Other days it was just you. A pause, a glance each way, and then the thrilling dash across open asphalt. Quick shoes pattering like drum beats until everyone made it safely to the other side. Laughter followed. Someone always dared to run ahead. Someone else warned them not to, and someone always pretended not to care while secretly racing to catch up anyway. Do you remember the sound of it all? The chorus of shoes on pavement, the rustle of jackets, the bell of a bicycle, the soft hum of a passing car radio drifting through rolled-down windows. Other kids talked about spelling tests they hadn't studied for, baseball games from the day before, whispered crushes on classmates whose names were spoken only when everyone promised not to tell. But even when conversation faded, the walk never felt lonely, because you were surrounded by motion. The neighborhood was waking up alongside you, garage doors lifting, delivery trucks rumbling faintly in the distance, sprinklers hissing to life one street over, all of it forming a gentle backdrop to the small, brave adventure of walking toward school. As the building finally came into view, something always shifted. The tall brick walls loomed larger with every step. The flagpole stood straight against the brightening sky. The windows caught the sunlight and flashed bright reflections toward the sidewalk like tiny beacons calling you forward. Your group started to spread out, some peeling off toward bike racks, others slowing near the playground fence, a few holding back for one more minute before the bell claimed the rest of the morning. Those last few steps always felt different. There was excitement, what stories today would bring, and a flicker of nervousness. Pop quizzes, unfamiliar lessons, teachers' stern voices echoing down long hallways. But underneath it all, there was comfort, because you arrived together. You weren't facing the day alone. You stood at the schoolyard edge with friends at your side, friends who had walked that same path with you almost every day, who knew your pace, your jokes, your secrets. And for a moment, before the bell rang, before the door swallowed everyone into neat lines and wooden desks, you breathed in the morning air and felt something rare. Freedom balanced perfectly with belonging. Life was slower then, and those simple walks to school carried more meaning than we ever realized at the time, because each step didn't just lead to lessons and chalkboards. It led deeper into childhood, into friendship, into a world that felt wide open and wonderfully safe. Chapter 2, School Bus Moments. You can almost feel that first step onto the bus again. A short climb up the stairs, one hand brushing the cool metal rail, the smell of vinyl seats already thick in the air before you even reach the aisle. Maybe it was mixed with a hint of diesel from the engine idling out front, and the leftover sweetness of someone's candy wrapper tucked into a coat pocket 2 rows back. And there's a moment on that bus you probably never forgot, even if you haven't thought about it in years. Where did you sit? Was it always the same place, 3 rows up on the right side, next to the window, or near the middle where you could hear everything but still melt into the crowd? Or were you brave enough to drift toward the back, where the loud kids ruled the ride like it was their own small kingdom? You remember the seats, cracked black vinyl that squeaked when you slid across them, the metal frames cold against your legs in winter and almost too warm by spring. The backs were low enough that you could peer over and see down the aisle. Whole waves of kids climbing aboard, coats flapping, scarves trailing, book straps thumping against shoulders as they looked for their usual spots. And every seat told a little story. This was where best friends whispered secrets. This was where someone practiced spelling words under their breath. This was where a shy kid sat silently, staring out the fogging window and tracing circles into the glass with one fingertip. Maybe that shy kid was you sometimes. The bus windows were always a little cloudy in the mornings, fogging up from warm breath against cold glass. You'd draw shapes without realizing it, smiley faces, loops, flattened hearts with uneven lines, just something to pass the quiet minutes while the road rolled by. And outside, fields slid past, farm fences stretched into the distance, telephone poles flicked by like a slow metronome for the start of the day. The world moved, but gently. Nothing rushed you yet. Life was slower then. You could lean your forehead against the cool window and watch the neighborhood fade behind you. Houses giving way to back roads slipping into open land, all while the bus hummed beneath your feet and children's voices rose and fell around you like a living soundtrack. Who sat beside you most mornings? Was it that one friend who smelled faintly of fresh soap from a too-clean uniform, who always chewed on a pencil eraser even before class started? Or maybe it was the class clown, already cracking jokes before the first bell, nudging your arm and pointing down the aisle when someone tripped on the steps. And then there were the loud kids in the back. You didn't need to see them to know exactly where they were. Their laughter bounced off the ceiling. Their sneakers thudded against seat frames. Somebody drummed on the metal wall with quick, impatient fingers. Every now and then, you'd hear the driver's voice, steady, not turning around, calling out, "Settle down back there," through the rumble of the engine. And for just a moment, things would quiet. Before building right back up again, did you ever sneak snacks onto the bus? A pack of crackers hidden in your lunch sack? A stick of gum shared between friends despite the rules? A caramel tucked carefully into a coat pocket, unwrapped slowly to avoid the telltale crinkle? Those tiny rebellions felt huge back then, little sparks of independence before the structured day began, and the smell of it all lingered. Vinyl, wool coats warm from bodies, paper lunch bags faintly scented with peanut butter and apples, cold metal handrails polished smooth by hundreds of small palms over the years, every sense alive at once, every detail stitching into memory, without you ever knowing it would last so long. Up at the front, the driver sat like the quiet captain of this rolling ship, broad shoulders tucked into a faded uniform jacket, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the gear lever, and every few minutes the slow swivel of their eyes into the rearview mirror, checking on the buzzing rows behind them. Did you ever catch their gaze, just for a second? That strange feeling of being seen among so many, then looking away quickly, pretending to study your shoelaces or the passing scenery outside, and then there was that unmistakable moment when someone you knew finally climbed aboard at a later stop, every neck turning down the aisle, that soft rush of breath when you spotted them, and you'd slide over just enough to leave room even before they asked, because seats on the bus weren't assigned, but belonging somehow was. Every group slowly formed its place. The shy kids near the front, the talkers in the middle, the rule breakers claiming the back row throne, and within it all, smaller partnerships formed quietly, you leaning closer to your seatmate as the bus turned, shoulders bumping naturally over potholes, shared laughs that only the two of you fully understood. And some mornings, the rain would coat the windows in fast-moving streaks, blurring houses into watercolor shapes. Other mornings, sunlight would break through the glass, landing in warm stripes across your knees and lunch bag. Each ride felt a little different, yet always familiar enough to feel safe. Did you know even then that these rides would become memories? Or did it just feel like routine? Just another ride, just another small chapter of childhood going by unnoticed. Because back then, none of us understood how temporary it all really was. The bus rides felt endless. The school year felt permanent. Friendships felt unbreakable. And the road ahead felt wide open without needing a map. Life was slower then, and the bell hadn't even rung yet. As the bus rolled toward the school building, brick walls rising into view, flag poles cutting the sky, playground equipment gleaming behind chain-link fences. The energy shifted inside the cabin, talking ramped up, zippers zipped, shoes shuffled, kids leaned forward, ready to stand once the brakes hissed. That final stretch always carried a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Excitement for the day's friendships, jokes, lessons, little victories. Nervousness for the things you couldn't predict. Pop quizzes, teachers' moods, unexpected moments that might stick with you long after the books closed. The bus slowed. The brakes sighed. And then that familiar jolt as it came to a stop. Rows rose from their seats in one big movement. Hands grabbed backpacks. Voices overlapped in a happy jumble. And you stepped back down those stairs at the front, vinyl smell fading behind you, fresh outdoor air replacing it, your feet landing on pavement with the soft certainty of a day beginning. Maybe you can still see that moment clearly. Your younger self stepping away from the bus, morning sun on your shoulders, friends clustering back together at your side. Take a second. Who rode the bus with you back then? Do you still remember their names? Share one of those names in the comments. Someone who sat beside you or made those mornings brighter. And if these school-bound memories feel like home to you, If walking back through these moments warms something inside your chest, this is exactly what Golden Memory Hour was made for. We gather here every week to walk through the memories we all lived but rarely stop to revisit. And if you'd like to keep traveling through time with us, tap subscribe and stay with us for the journey ahead. Chapter 3. The Classroom. You can almost feel the shift the moment you step through that heavy classroom door. The hallway noise melting behind you, the warmth settling into quiet, and suddenly you were inside that small world where days always seemed to stretch long, even while the years disappeared far too quickly. Rows of wooden desks stood waiting, scarred and smoothed by countless hands before yours. Some carried faint carved initials, tiny hearts, uneven letters etched by students you never met but somehow felt connected to. Each desk held its own little history, and maybe yours had a secret marking too, the small scratch you traced with your fingertip when lessons grew slow. Was your desk near the window? Close enough that you could watch trees sway outside when your mind drifted, or count clouds marching across the sky while a teacher's voice faded into a calm background hum? Or were you closer to the middle, surrounded by whispers and pencil taps, close enough to feel the warmth of bodies learning together? Maybe you were nearer the front, sitting taller than your age felt ready for, hoping the teacher might smile at your raised hand, or that they wouldn't call on you when the answers didn't come easily. The morning light slid through tall windows, slow and steady, laying ribbons across desktop surfaces, catching dust motes drifting through the air like tiny floating stars. Those desks glowed softly, worn smooth by time, while books stacked on top of them smelled faintly of paper pulp and ink. And above it all, that chalkboard waited, dark green or worn slate black, covered in neat cursive loops from the day before, now smudged just enough to feel lived in. Then came the first sound, that gentle, almost musical scratch, chalk touching board. Do you remember the smell of chalk dust? Dry and clean, a little cloudy in the air, settling gently onto sleeves and freckles without anyone noticing it happening. Each stroke of chalk made a whispering rhythm across the room. Tap, drag, squeak, forming letters that felt important, even when you didn't always understand why. Sometimes the board would be wiped clean, a teacher's eraser thudding softly against felt, sending a pale cloud drifting briefly before settling back down across the ledge. And somehow, even that erasing sound felt comforting. Up at the front stood your teacher, always a little taller than memory, told the truth aloud. Their shoes clicked across the floor between the chalkboard and the desk, polished and steady, and with them came that unmistakable scent, perfume or cologne gently floating by whenever they passed your row, not overpowering, just enough to remind you that adults seemed so put together, like they carried secrets of confidence children hadn't learned yet. It mixed with the chalk dust, the wood of the desks, and the fresh paper scent of new worksheets, creating that classroom smell that, even decades later, sometimes still flickers back inside you without permission. Backpacks hung on hooks at the back, canvas straps tangled like sleepy vines, and lunch boxes lined up neatly beneath desk legs, bright red metal, cowboy pictures, cartoon scenes faded by use, each holding the promise of sandwiches cut carefully into triangles and apples that had rolled around all morning, making quiet bumps. Here, in this small room, was where the day formally began. The teacher rang a bell, not loud, just enough to gather attention, and then everyone stood, hands folded over hearts, eyes rising toward the corner of the room where the flag waited, the daily pledge. Do you remember speaking it together? Voices overlapping, some confident and loud, some quiet and trailing behind, forming as one united chorus of young voices still learning what the words truly meant. Not everyone said every line perfectly. Some children mouthed the words silently so no one noticed their uncertainty. Some rushed through the ending too fast, but nobody minded because it wasn't about perfection. It was about belonging. It was about being part of something bigger, even if you didn't quite know what that something was yet. And right after came attendance. Names called aloud, each one answered with a quick "here" or "present." How did your voice sound back then when your name floated through the air? Was it bold or small and careful? Did you clear your throat first, or answer too softly and feel the teacher repeat your name with a warm question mark behind it? Each roll call stitched the class together, a reminder that everyone was accounted for, everyone mattered, and then the learning began. Not loud learning, but quiet discovery. Pencils softened inside sharpeners with their hollow grind. Paper rustled as workbooks opened, and kids leaned over desks, foreheads almost touching pages as letters formed slowly under small hands. Mistakes happened. Erasers wore pink streaks across pages trying to fix crooked spelling. Some kids learned quickly, some needed time, and both were okay, because back then, nobody raced the clock inside that room. The teacher had patience. So did the walls. So did that chalkboard, waiting as many times as it took for understanding to bloom. Sometimes you drifted. Your eyes found the globe resting in the back corner, bright oceans swirling against painted continents. You spun it gently once during free moments, watching countries blur together into color, wondering what lived beyond the lines drawn over blue seas. You saw rows of towns and places you couldn't imagine yet, and thought maybe someday you might go there too. Or maybe you were the kind of child who found wonder closer, in passing notes folded tiny into triangles, in the quiet bravery of sharing your crayons, or in exchanging shy smiles with someone 2 desks away you secretly admired. And sometimes your desk itself became your small world. A loose pencil trembled at the slightest bump. Textbook corners bent from repeated page turns, small treasures tucked into desk cubbies, a smooth pebble, a lucky coin, a library card, simple things that made the morning feel yours. Was your desk near the window? Did you ever press your forehead against the glass during slower lessons, watching birds land on wires outside, snow swirling silently, or fresh spring leaves flickering in shy green bursts? Those windows felt like portals, even when you couldn't step through them yet. And slowly, the classroom became familiar enough to feel safe. It taught you routines long before you realized you were learning something deeper than spelling and arithmetic. You learned to listen, to wait your turn, to be patient, to notice the people sitting beside you, to still your body, even when your heart wanted to run free beyond the playground, just waiting outside. And every single morning, without needing to ask, the room reminded you of something essential. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Enough rooms, enough desks, enough pencils passed hand to hand when someone forgot theirs, enough voices to fill the pledge, enough care from teachers who showed up every day, never knowing how deeply they'd be remembered decades later, enough structure to make childhood feel safe, enough wonder to shape a lifetime of remembering, and even now, as you picture it, those wooden desks still stand somewhere in the quiet spaces of your memory. That chalk still scratches faintly behind your thoughts. That globe still spins when your imagination drifts. And your younger self still sits there, waiting patiently, hands folded on a desk, eyes wide with unspoken curiosity, unaware that every single moment was already becoming precious. So tell me, was your desk near the window or tucked back where you could blend into the crowd? And if this classroom is stirring something warm inside you, if these school mornings feel like the beginning of a story you live too, come walk these memories with us every week here on Golden Memory Hour. These moments deserve to be remembered together. Chapter 4. Lessons and Daydreaming. The clock always seemed louder than it needed to be. Tick, tick, tick. Each second falling from the round white face above the chalkboard, landing somewhere deep inside your chest, like gentle taps reminding you just how slowly time could move when you were 10 years old. Did you stare at it too? Counting the minutes until recess like they were stepping stones leading you closer to freedom. Eyes flicking from the second hand to the classroom door, wondering how something so small could feel so far away. Or were you the dreamer near the back? The one whose gaze didn't live on the clock at all, but drifted past the windows instead, following clouds shaped like dragons, ships, and castles floating across that endless blue canvas, where real life felt so much more exciting than the neat rows of desks you were sitting in. Maybe that dreamer was you. Your pencil rested loosely between your fingers, tapping the desk in tiny rhythms as the teacher's voice washed over the room like background noise. Multiplication tables, spelling drills, history dates that seemed to belong to another universe entirely. Meanwhile, the real adventure of your day was happening quietly inside your head. Sunbeams stretched across your notebook, warm stripes laying right across the blank margins where something was always waiting to be born. Did you ever doodle instead of paying attention? Carefully sketching little houses with smoke curling from the chimneys, cars that looked like something from a comic book, stick figures leaping midair, playing kickball or racing each other toward wildly drawn finish lines. Maybe there were stars scattered along the edges of your paper, or hearts hiding behind math problems you pretended to solve, or dragons snaking through the letters of your name when nobody was looking. You drew worlds while the lessons went on, and you didn't even realize you were practicing imagination, the very thing adulthood would later call creativity. Did you pass notes, folded into tiny squares or triangles that slid across spaces between desks like secret messages from another dimension? Want to trade snacks? Recess tag? Who do you like? Sometimes the notes were bold and confident, sometimes written in rushed, shaky pencil, as if the letters themselves feared being caught. You learned early how to move them quietly, under books, off the edges of desks, into waiting hands when the teacher's back was turned to write chalk numbers across the board. Chalk scraped softly against green slate, shh, and suddenly everyone straightened up, eyes forward, hands flat, pencils still. For the next few moments, you returned to being the good student, following along, pretending your mind wasn't already halfway across the playground. But even while facing forward, daydreams kept whispering. You imagined the whistle blows. You saw the classroom doors swing wide open. You felt sneakers pounding pavement, the metal chains of the swings creaking above you, the hollow thump of rubber balls slapping against concrete. Your mind rehearsed recess again and again like a preview of the best part of the day. Next to you, someone tapped their pencil softly too. Tap, 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 tap. Maybe it was the same kid every day, or someone different, dependent on where you sat that semester. Hands drummed against desktops. Pages shuffled, shoelaces dangling nervously under chair legs, swayed with restless energy. The classroom hummed with barely restrained impatience. Do you remember where your desk sat? Was it near the window? Did sunlight warm one side of your face while the other stayed shaded, making it hard to focus even when you tried? Or were you stuck in the middle row, surrounded by whispers and passing notes, where distractions lived on all sides? Or maybe you sat near the back, the unofficial territory of daydreamers and quiet rebels, where teachers had to strain to make eye contact with you, and perfect doodles found their way onto every spare inch of paper. And sometimes you didn't doodle just on paper. You carved tiny shapes into desk wood with the tip of your pencil, your initials nestled beside someone else's from years before. Dates scratched faintly into the grain of old desks that had held generations of thinking, dreaming children just like you. Those desks remembered things no history book ever would. Up front, chalk numbers filled the board. 7 times 9 equals 6315, divided by 3 equals 5, right in cursive. The numbers were neat, perfect, unbothered. And yet your eyes kept falling into the afternoon fantasies hiding inside your head. What would you play first at recess? Who would you find? That one friend who always sprinted straight toward the monkey bars? The kid who brought marbles or baseball cards, gathering small crowds at the edge of the fence? Or the classmate you were too nervous to speak to directly, so you planned imaginary conversations instead, rehearsing brave moments you never quite acted on? Life wasn't about tests back then. It was about moments, small, meaningful, heart-racing moments you carried quietly through every school day. And while lessons told you how to spell and subtract, daydreams taught you how to feel, how to long for something, how to imagine better days before they happened, how to create entire universes right behind your eyes. Outside the window, birds cut through the sunlight. Leaves wavered in the breeze. Cars passed slowly beyond the school fence. The real world carried on. But you were suspended between two worlds, the routine of the classroom and the wonder of imagination. And even as adults now, that part of you still exists, the part that drifts during meetings, the part that doodles while on the phone, the part that stares out windows just like you once did, searching for stories inside clouds again. We didn't have much, but we had enough space to dream, enough time, before time became something we constantly ran from, enough quiet moments where imagination took root and shaped who we eventually became. Somewhere along the way, recess came and went, classes let out, years stacked on top of years. But that small version of you, the one tracing shapes in notebook margins, passing notes, tapping pencils, dreaming without permission, they never left. They just grew older. If this chapter stirred memories of your classroom days, tell me, were you a doodler, a note passer, or a clock watcher, counting minutes to recess? Share your school personality in the comments so we can remember together. And if stepping back into these forgotten classrooms brings warmth to something you thought had gone quiet, this is the heart of Golden Memory Hour, where we return to the small moments that shaped us. If you'd like to keep wandering through your childhood with us, tap subscribe and stay close for the chapters still waiting ahead. Chapter 5. Lunchtime. By the time the lunch bell rang, you could almost feel the shift in the room, that little lift in everyone's shoulders, the sudden rustle of notebooks closing, chairs sliding back, voices rising just a notch like birds ready to scatter. The sound of the bell itself still echoes in memory, sharp and bright, floating down the hallways and into your chest like a promise. Food was coming, and freedom, even if only for a little while. You reached for your lunch sack, the familiar crinkle of brown paper folding under your fingers. Maybe your mom had carefully written your name on the front in neat cursive with a blue pen. Or maybe she'd drawn a tiny smile or a heart beside it without saying anything out loud. What lunch did you hope she packed? Was it bologna on white bread with a careful line of yellow mustard straight down the middle, the corners cut diagonally because she knew you liked it that way? Maybe it was peanut butter and jelly wrapped tight in wax paper that made a soft popping sound when you peeled it open. The jelly always bleeding just slightly through the bread by the time noon arrived. Or maybe, on the best days, it was something special. Leftover fried chicken tucked lovingly in foil, a buttered biscuit wrapped in a napkin, or a slice of homemade cake slipped in as a surprise treat for doing well on your spelling test. You held that sandwich with both hands before taking the first bite, the cafeteria noise pressing in all around you, but fading just enough for that moment to feel like your own. Long tables stretched across the lunchroom, wood or metal benches attached underneath, rows of kids carrying trays, paper sacks, and thermos bottles making their way down the aisles in an organized chaos of chatter and laughter. The smell of lunch filled the air, warm bread, faint sweetness of fruit, the unmistakable creamy tang of milk. Your thermos might have been bright red or shiny silver, the lid unscrewing slowly as you took care not to spill. Inside, tomato soup, still warm, or maybe chocolate milk, always a little sweeter than the carton version. Milk cartons sat lined up like tiny soldiers on the tables. Folded tops you popped open with your thumbs, sometimes spraying yourself just a little if you weren't careful. Someone always messed it up, and everyone laughed anyway, and you always had your place. Same seat, same stretch of table, same group of faces waiting for you. Who always offered trades? There was always that one kid who acted like a marketplace in human form, leaning back with a grin, surveying everyone's lunch like a professional dealer. I'll trade you my apple for your cookie. No, what else you got? I've got chips. That sacred negotiation dance happened every single day. Desserts were the true currency. Homemade cookies wrapped in plastic, little cupcakes with slightly crooked icing, slices of banana bread tucked into foil, tiny bags of candy meant for later, but usually opened too early. Trading wasn't just about food, it was about connection. Little deals sealed friendships. A fair trade meant smiles. An unfair one meant playful protests and declarations of, "That's not even." Some kids were generous, offering extra carrot sticks or apple slices just to share. Others guarded their desserts like priceless treasure. Maybe you were somewhere in between, hoping for a good trade but never wanting to give up the one sweet thing waiting at the bottom of your bag. Across from you sat classmates still half lost in morning lessons, pencils tucked into shirt pockets, fingernails faintly gray with chalk dust, now laughing with mouths full of crackers and stories overlapping each other so fast no one could finish before the next voice jumped in. What did you talk about? Cartoons planned for after school. Who won the kickball game yesterday? Which teacher gave the hardest spelling tests? Who sat where on the bus that morning? And sometimes whispered topics no adult was meant to overhear. Early crushes, imagined adventures, schemes for recess that felt as serious as battle plans. The clatter of trays and the scrape of benches provided a steady beat beneath it all, a cafeteria symphony that wrapped around the room. Life was slower then. No phones lighting up every table, no earbuds blocking out laughter, no rushing through meals to check notifications or screens. Lunch was not something you hurried past. Lunch was something you lived inside. You could take your time, sip your drink, nibble your cookie slowly, let the conversations drift and spin around you until your cheeks hurt from smiling. And then there were the classroom lunches, when bad weather or special days meant eating right at your desk. Paper sacks perched beside open notebooks, thermos cups lined in tidy rows along the back shelf, the smell of peanut butter and warm soup tangled with chalk dust still lingering from the board. Kids sitting sideways in their desks so they could talk to friends behind them. Teachers pretending not to notice when crumbs sprinkled into the desk lids or wrappers quietly passed between rows. Did you ever drop something embarrassing? A hard-boiled egg rolling across the floor, an apple bouncing out of your hand, a sandwich slipping from wax paper straight down onto your lap? The whole room would freeze for a half second, then explode into laughter, and somehow that embarrassment never felt cruel, just another childhood moment that soon became a story retold for years. Maybe someone teased gently. Maybe your best friend helped rescue the mess. And pretty soon, everyone moved on, because that was childhood. Small disasters healed in minutes. No moment lasted too long, except in memory. Life was slower then, and lunchtime was its own little world apart, suspended between lessons and playground freedom. The smell of food packed up slowly as trash bins filled with crumpled sacks and empty cartons. Kids wiped their fingers on napkins or the backs of their jeans. Thermos lids screwed tight again. Last crumbs swept off desks or brushed from laps. Then came the second bell. That slightly reluctant sound, not as exciting as the first, but steady, calling everyone back toward routines. Some kids groaned dramatically. Some rushed around to finish their last bites. Some traded one final cookie half for a quick apple slice, sealing deals right to the final second. And before you realized it, lunch was over. But the emotion lingered. Bellies warm, voices still buzzing. Friendships reinforced in tiny shared moments over bread crusts and dessert trades. You walked away from the table or slid back into your desk, feeling full of more than just food. You felt filled with belonging. Take a moment now. What lunch did you hope for the most to see in your bag? Did you trade your dessert or guard it carefully? And who always sat across from you? The face you still picture every time you think of that cafeteria table. Share your lunchtime memory in the comments. Your stories keep these moments alive for everyone who watches. And if reliving these school days brings warmth back into your heart, if you enjoy revisiting the simple joys we once shared, then Golden Memory Hour is your place to belong. Subscribe and stay with us, because there are still so many memories waiting to be walked back through together. Chapter 6. Recess Freedom. The bell would ring, sharp and sudden, and everything inside you lifted at once. Pencils dropped mid-sentence, chairs scraped backward against classroom floors. A ripple of movement passed through the rows as everyone leapt to their feet like a single living wave. And just like that, the outside was calling. You filed into the hallway buzzing with anticipation, shoes already tapping faster than usual, the promise of fresh air pulling you forward. The moment the door finally swung open, sunlight spilled across the steps and the noise burst loose, laughter rushing out before your feet ever touched the pavement. And then you were free. Do you remember that first breath of outdoor air? The way it felt cooler than the classroom, carrying the scent of cut grass and warm dust? For a brief stretch of time, no chalkboards waited, no clocks judged, no rules pressed down on you, just motion, sound, play. The playground always came alive in stages. At one corner, the jump rope girls formed up, two friends gripping rope handles while a long, colorful strand slapped rhythmically against the pavement. Slap, whir, slap. The sound became its own music, steady as a heartbeat. Kids lined up, bouncing on their toes, anticipating their turn to leap in. Maybe you can still feel how the rope skimmed the tips of your shoes at the perfect moment, how you tucked your knees and sprang off the ground, counting in your head. 1, 2, 3. Each successful jump, a tiny victory. Or maybe you preferred to circle the edge, quietly watching, swaying to the rhythm without stepping in yourself. Were you the runner or the quiet watcher? Across the blacktop, a game of stickball broke into sudden motion. A skinny wooden bat swung wide, missing air one moment, then cracking into a rubber ball the next. A sound that echoed against nearby brick walls and sent kids scattering into laughter. Run! Sneakers pounded pavement as bases were imagined into existence. Fire hydrants, fence posts, chunks of sidewalk. No chalk lines needed, no formal fields. Just shared agreement on where safety lay. Did you ever sprint so hard you felt your lungs burning, chasing that darting red ball skidding across the playground, not even thinking about victory, only the thrill of being in motion? The wind rushed past your ears. Your pulse matched your feet. Your world narrowed to color and sound and breath. And somewhere along the way, scraped knees became badges of honor. You didn't remember falling, only the sting afterward, bright flashes of pain when dirt embedded itself into skin. You'd brush off gravel with trembling fingers. Someone always said, "You're fine," like it was a magic phrase. Sometimes a teacher would appear with a handkerchief or a tiny square of gauze from the nurse's kit, pressing it gently against your knee before sending you back out again. No long interruptions, just go play. Because play didn't wait. In another stretch of the yard, the dodgeball games were underway. You can almost feel the tension gathering, the uneasy excitement of standing mid-court, eyeing that familiar red rubber ball bouncing lightly in a classmate's hands. Would they throw at you? Would they miss? Did you ever get picked last? Or worse, were you the one left shifting awkwardly behind the others, pretending you didn't care? Some days you ran straight into the thundering chaos, weaving, ducking, diving, the ball thudding against pavement just inches from your heels. Other days, you lingered back, watching, hoping your turn wouldn't come too soon. Yet even the moments of waiting mattered, because when a ball sailed past your shoulder or glanced harmlessly off your sleeve, relief burst into laughter. You were still in the game, still belonging. Nearby, the swings creaked into motion. Chains rattled gently under shifting weight. Kids pumped their legs higher and higher, the earth dropping away beneath their feet, the sky rushing closer with every arc. Do you remember the weightless pause at the highest point? That brief hush where everything seemed to stop before gravity tugged you back down again? The breeze brushed your face. Your stomach fluttered just enough to make you laugh out loud. Some kids jumped before the swing slowed, leaping into soft grass with rolling tumbles and collapsed giggles. Others clutched tighter, not quite ready to surrender that floating feeling yet. There were quieter corners too. Under trees at the edge of the yard, small clusters formed. Kids trading marbles on the ground, carefully rolling glass orbs across the dirt to see whose would land closest to a makeshift target. Buttons traded hands, sticks collected into piles, songs whispered and shared just between friends. Were you ever the one tucked into that quiet shade, choosing closeness over chaos? Or did your feet always lead you toward the loudest laughter? Every child found their place somewhere in that mosaic of motion, and somehow, no matter where you stood or ran or waited, you fit, because nobody kept score the way adults do. Nobody measured worth by wins. Recess measured something else entirely: how loud you laughed, how fast you ran, how free you felt for those precious minutes. Those minutes mattered more than we knew. Do you remember the playground whistle? 3 quick blasts that sliced through the noise like a curtain call. Things slowed suddenly, games frozen mid-move, jump ropes stilled, swings eased into shorter arcs. There was always that shared groan. Not yet, just 5 more minutes. But just like everything else, recess ended. You gathered breath, hair damp with sweat, faces pink from sun and sprinting, hands dusted dirt from jeans or skirts. Friends fell into step again, walking back toward the building, still buzzing with unfinished conversations. And even then, while heading back inside, part of you remained on the pavement. Because something special had happened out there, not competitions, not scores, but joy, unmeasured and unfiltered, the kind of joy that wraps around memory and stays forever. Those playground moments stitched friendships tighter. They taught you daring and forgiveness, and how to fall down and get back up smiling. Sometimes we forget that freedom doesn't always come in grand moments. Sometimes it comes in small intervals, carrying jump ropes and red rubber balls, in laughter shared with classmates whose names we still remember decades later. Take a moment now. Were you the runner on the playground, or the quiet watcher near the fence? Or maybe you were both, depending on the day. Share your recess memory in the comments. A favorite game, a friend you ran with, or even the time you scraped your knee but kept playing anyway. Your stories are what keep these moments alive here at Golden Memory Hour. And if these playground memories feel like coming home to you, if walking through these sounds and sights makes your heart feel lighter, stay with us. Tap subscribe and keep traveling back to the moments that shaped who we became, one memory at a time. Chapter 7, Walking Home. You can still feel the shift the moment the final bell rang, that fast flutter in your chest as books slid into worn satchels, the scrape of chair legs against wooden floors as every child stood at once, already halfway to freedom, before the teacher even finished dismissing the class. You stepped into the hallway, the air louder now, brighter, lockers clanging shut, sneakers squeaking on tile, voices stacking over one another in happy chaos. And then the doors opened. Sunlight spilled down onto the front steps like an invitation, and the world waited right there for you. The first step off the school grounds always felt different, lighter somehow, as if responsibility loosened its grip the moment your shoes touched that familiar sidewalk again. Your book bag bounced against your back with each quick stride, the strap riding up on your shoulder, tugging gently at your collar as you walked. And didn't you always loosen it halfway through the trip home? Sliding it down to one elbow because the day was done and there was no reason to be stiff anymore? Kids poured out in clusters, best friends immediately locking into side-by-side formation, siblings scanning for one another through the crowds, small groups forming naturally like birds finding their migration partners. Do you remember who fell into step beside you every afternoon? Was it the same friend each day? The one whose laughter always came first, echoing down the street before you even saw them? Or did your pack change depending on who got dismissed first? Whose classroom opened sooner? Whose route crossed yours earlier on the walk? And then the real walking began. Brick sidewalks warm beneath thin soles, dry leaves crunching at the neighborhood edges when autumn rolled in, shoelaces coming loose halfway home no matter how tightly you tied them that morning. You passed houses you knew like old friends, white-trimmed porches lined with rocking chairs, front yards guarded by garden gnomes or tidy flower beds, screen doors standing open to let the breeze pull through, and maybe as you walked, a set of familiar eyes waited behind a living room curtain. Did your mother stand at the window watching for you? Not hovering, just quietly checking, one small glance toward the street, another toward the clock, until your shape finally appeared at the end of the block, that knowing look of relief the moment she saw you safe and smiling, still unaware of how much that small gesture meant. Some afternoons, you waved when you spotted her silhouette behind the glass. Other days, you pretended not to see, not because you didn't care, but because independence felt powerful. And being seen sometimes reminded you just how deeply someone was watching out for you. Backpacks were dropped the same way almost every day. Thunk, right inside the front door or onto the porch rail, never fully put away, just tossed aside like punctuation, marking the end of school and the beginning of life. And bikes began to appear. One at a time they rolled from garages and side yards, wheels rattling across driveways, tires humming against pavement, kickstands clanking as they were flipped up and forgotten. Soon fences lined themselves with bright handlebars resting across wood rails, kids propping bikes wherever space existed, because everyone knew nobody was heading inside yet. Neighborhood games began without announcement, no planning committee, no invitation sent. One kid tossed a rubber ball across a lawn, and suddenly there were 10 kids running after it. A stick appeared, and baseball rules made themselves up mid-play. Jump ropes formed circles. Hopscotch grids were redrawn over yesterday's faded chalk. And bikes, always the bikes, became everything. Race tools, obstacle challengers, horse steeds when imagination took over. Did your house become the snack stop? Was it your kitchen the kids drifted toward without needing to ask? That place where the fridge door opened and closed like a revolving door, where cookies were broken in halves to make enough for everyone, where chipped cups of lemonade lined the counter beside melting ice. Or maybe your house always came second, but you knew exactly where to go once your stomach reminded you that freedom burned energy quickly. The sound of screen doors slammed in rhythm with shortcuts through yards. Anyone got crackers? Did your mom make Kool-Aid? Is there bread left for sandwiches? And somewhere, your mom or another neighbor leaned in a doorway, just watching. No shouting unless needed. No hovering unless danger approached. They trusted the neighborhood. They trusted the kids. And the kids trusted the days. Were you the runner? The one always racing the sun to be first, even when there wasn't a finish line? Or were you the quiet watcher, sitting on the curb while bikes zipped past, letting laughter swirl around you while you studied the sky's slow afternoon shift? Clouds always drifted lazily then, as if the sky itself wasn't in any hurry either, and the freedom of walking home didn't live only in speed or games. It lived in knowing no adults were timing you. No bell controlled your steps anymore. The calendar belonged to children's clocks now, measured not in minutes, but in how long the shadows could stretch before calling it a day. Neighbors passed by with grocery bags and gentle smiles, some calling your name, asking how school went, offering quick candy rewards pulled from coat pockets. Each adult knew you, not because of technology, but because of presence. They saw you grow day by day, year by year. The neighborhood was a family stretched across porches and fences, and you belonged to it. Even the arguments that flared between kids ended as quickly as they began, patched over by the next thrown ball or shared popsicle. No grudges lasted long when the sidewalk was waiting, and then, as the sun began lowering, the first dinner call sounded somewhere down the street. A familiar voice stretched long and loud from a back porch, one name carried by the breeze, and suddenly the countdown began. Kids began disappearing one by one, heels pounding toward home, game circles shrinking, bikes being retrieved reluctantly. Did you wait for the very last possible moment? Hoping your name wouldn't be next, trying to squeeze one more turn of the rope, one more ride down the block, one more base run before real life returned. Because something magical lived in that shared afternoon freedom. It was the last place childhood ruled without agenda, the final stretch where responsibilities hadn't yet returned. Those hours built friendships more deeply than classrooms ever could, taught laughter more freely than textbooks ever explained, and offered peace unavailable anywhere but in motion and togetherness. Those minutes mattered more than we knew. And if you close your eyes now, you can still probably feel it, your backpack thudding to the floor, the warmth of sun pressing into your shoulders, friends gathering around your bike, streets filled with voices climbing and falling like music, and that gentle awareness, that life right there in the middle of childhood felt open, felt safe, felt endless. Take a second for me. Did your mother stand watching you from the window? Was your house the snack stop everyone gathered at? Tell us in the comments. Your small memory might be the one that unlocks another viewer's smile tonight. And if moments like this still stir something inside your heart, if you want to keep walking these old sidewalks with us every week, this is what Golden Memory Hour was built for. Tap subscribe and stay with us. We've got miles of memories left to wander together. Chapter 8, After School Radio and TV. You can almost feel the shift the moment you step through the front door. Backpacks landing with soft thumps near the wall. Shoes kicked off into small uneven piles by the doorway. The quiet hum of home wrapping around you like a familiar blanket. Maybe the air inside smelled faintly of laundry soap, or warm bread resting on the counter, or dust stirred by sunlight filtering through thin living room curtains. But more than anything else, you were listening, because in the back of your mind you already knew what time it was. You didn't need a clock. Your body somehow remembered the schedule. That certain hour when voices leapt from radios, when black and white images flickered onto glowing screens, when the ordinary afternoon suddenly felt filled with magic. You hurried toward the living room. Was it the radio you reached for first? That sturdy wooden box sitting proud on the shelf, its dials glowing creamy amber, its cloth speaker grill warm to the touch? Or was it the television, that heavy cabinet set with rounded corners, a thick glass screen reflecting the window behind it like a faint ghost of the outside world? What show were you rushing home for? The Lone Ranger, the Cisco Kid, Hopalong Cassidy, or maybe one of those early cartoons where characters bounced across choppy animation lines, their voices sharp and cheerful as simple stories unfolded in perfect 12-minute adventures. You probably heard the radio before you even reached the room. That slight crackle, the faint hiss of static as the tuning knob clicked into place, a voice drifting in, then slipping away until the frequency landed just right. And suddenly, the room came alive. Horses galloping, gunshots popping like distant fireworks, heroic music swelling from small built-in speakers that strained to carry it, and you, folding yourself onto the floor in front of the radio, legs crossed, chin resting on your hands, while the sound painted pictures no screen could ever fully match. Did you imagine yourself riding beside the heroes, wearing a mask and wide hat, saving towns only visible behind your eyes? Those radio stories weren't just shows, they were doorways. And you stepped through them every afternoon. Sometimes the radio would finish just as the television was warming up. You'd turn that stiff silver knob and wait for the picture to bloom through gray snowfall. At first, just dots dancing in static patterns, then shadows, then a clearer image slowly forming in flickering waves. Who held the antenna just right? Was it you? Standing carefully beside the set, arms raised awkwardly like you were guiding invisible aircraft through the sky? Or was it a sibling, balancing on the couch cushion, turning the long rabbit ear antenna one tiny notch at a time while someone called out from the floor, "Hold it! No, go back a little. That's it!" The metal prongs clicked, the picture sharpened, and cheers rose like a victory parade across the living room. You could finally see again. Black and white characters jumping into life, cowboys racing across open plains, cartoon critters running off cliff edges and floating impossibly in midair, While children sat scattered across the rug in quiet wonder, some of you lay belly down, feet kicking gently behind you. Some leaned against the couch, wrapping arms around knees pulled tight to chests. Some rested heads near older siblings' shoulders, sharing warmth as the room glowed pale and bright. There were rules. Even then, don't sit too close to the screen. Don't talk during the show. Don't bump the antenna. But mostly, there was silence. That shared kind of silence where the room was full, but nobody needed to speak because everyone was already traveling. And through that tiny window of flickering light, you weren't children scattered across a carpet anymore. You were explorers, adventurers, time travelers, heroes and sidekicks, and brave wanderers all at once. The static had its own rhythm, a faint shimmer underneath the programming. Sometimes the picture would slip, faces melting into lines for just a second, before someone scrambled to adjust the antenna again. And you never hated those interruptions. They were part of the ritual, a reminder that everything you were watching was fragile, temporary, a small miracle stitched together by wires and waves. And as you watched, you probably clutched something warm in your hands. A mug of cocoa placed beside you on the floor by your mother, a slice of bread with butter melting into the corners, a cookie eased quietly into your palm so it wouldn't interrupt the moment. What snack meant showtime for you? Was it graham crackers snapped down the middle, buttered toast folded like a sandwich, a bowl of cereal eaten even though technically dinner was coming later? Someone always crunched quietly. Someone always whispered commentary even when they were told not to. Someone always pretended to reenact the scenes behind the couch once the show ended, jumping out with pretend pistols or wild cartoon hops. Were you that kid, the reenactor, the loud storyteller? Or were you the quiet observer, the one who didn't need to perform because the magic itself felt enough? In those afternoons, entertainment wasn't endless. There weren't channels spinning forever into the night. There wasn't choice layered over choice. There was one show, then another, and then it was over. And that ending mattered because it sent you back into your body, back into the room, back into the day. The screen darkened. The radio dial stopped glowing, and the spell gently loosened its hold. Suddenly, you noticed the clock again. Homework waiting on kitchen tables, mothers stirring pots behind swinging doors, dogs scratching to be let outside, the hum of daily life picking right back up where it had paused. But for that one golden hour, something sacred happened. You weren't rushing toward the future. You weren't processing the past. You were simply present, fully there, fully alive. Life was slower then, not because there was less to do, but because every moment was tasted fully before moving on. And maybe even now, you can still feel it, that soft heaviness in your limbs after lying on the carpet too long, that tiny disappointment when the theme music faded because you wanted to stay inside the story a little longer, that excitement knowing you'd talk about it tomorrow at school with the same kids who sprawled beside you today. Take a moment. What show did you rush home for? Was it a cowboy drama, a space adventure, a colorful cartoon that still lives somewhere in your memory? Type its name in the comments below. Your memory might unlock someone else's. And while you're here, if stories like this make you feel quietly seen, if these shared moments feel like coming home, Golden Memory Hour was created exactly for you. This channel exists so these memories don't fade into silence. So afternoons on the rug, static-filled radios, and warm shared wonder always have somewhere to live. If you don't want to miss our next walk through time, tap subscribe and stay here with us. Chapter 9. Dinner and Family Time. Dinner meant coming home. The front door would close behind you with that familiar click. Backpacks dropped somewhere near the wall. Shoes kicked off without ceremony. The day already beginning to soften around the edges. And before you even reached the kitchen, the smell found you first. Warm meatloaf baking in the oven. Onions browning in a pan. Soft notes of mashed potatoes and gravy drifting through the house like a promise. Your stomach knew the routine better than the clock ever did. You didn't have to ask. You just followed the scent. The dining room light was always on, a little too bright at first, glowing against the coming dusk outside the windows. Curtains half drawn. Table already set. Folded napkins lined in neat triangles or simple squares beside mismatched forks and spoons. Plates stacked thick in the center, waiting to be passed around. What dish reminds you most of home? Was it meatloaf, the edges always just a little crispy? Or chicken legs baked till the skin crackled when you cut into them? Maybe it was rice and beans, slow simmered stews, spaghetti on nights when money stretched thin but laughter stayed rich. Some foods didn't just taste good, they felt like safety. At the head of the table sat Dad, always the same chair, the one closest to the kitchen doorway, where he could reach for the salt without standing, leaning back slightly with tired shoulders after a long workday, sleeves rolled up, watch slipping down his wrist, paper folded beside his plate. Mom moved between stove and table, setting down dishes one by one, steam curling into her face as she smiled without pause. Hot serving spoons tapped gently along ceramic bowls, the clatter of lids lifting, the quiet choreography of dinner coming together. Kids took their seats in practiced order. Your chair scraped softly back across the floor, elbows rested where they weren't supposed to. Drinks were passed, juice sloshing dangerously near rims, water glasses sweating onto the tablecloth. The moment before eating always stretched the longest. Everybody was already hungry, but there was waiting. Who said grace? Was it Mom's gentle voice, steady and calm? Dad clearing his throat before beginning? Maybe sometimes one of the kids, rushed words tumbling out too fast because the food looked too good to delay. Heads bowed, hands folded, some genuine, some fidgeting, eyes peeked open now and then checking the plates. The words varied, but the feeling stayed the same, gratitude, even when nobody fully understood what for yet. Dinner meant coming home. Forks lifted in near unison. The first bite was always quiet, a ritual of relief, heat spreading through cold hands, warmness sinking into tired bellies, murmured mms escaping before anyone spoke fully. Then the table slowly came alive. How was school? Voices overlapping. You won't believe what happened today. Stories poured out in fragments. Spelling test triumphs, playground triumphs, the teacher who laughed when someone sneezed mid-lesson, the kid who tripped near the swings. Laughter rose and fell like a tide. Someone told a joke nobody finished properly. Someone groaned dramatically. Dad laughed hardest, even when it didn't make sense. Steam curled up from plates and fogged the underside of glasses. Napkins were unfolded and refolded as mouths were wiped. Fingers brushed into crumbs. Hands reached across the table again and again. Pass the rolls? More potatoes? Can I have the ketchup? Food traveled constantly, stitching the table together with motion, and every plate held more than dinner. They held listening, connection, togetherness that no one named out loud, because it felt automatic then. Dinner meant coming home. Every family had its rhythms. Some tables were noisy and chaotic, kids talking all at once while adults negotiated order that never quite arrived. Some were quieter, gentle conversation wrapped in clinking silverware and steady chewing. But no matter the volume, every dinner carried its own small magic. Because for that moment, nobody had to be anywhere else. Homework waited. TV shows could be rewound. Laundry stayed unfinished. The world outside the walls paused. Were you sitting near a sibling, nudging knees under the table? Or near a parent who quietly placed the best pieces on your plate without you ever asking? Maybe there were nights when everyone was there, and maybe nights when someone's chair was empty. Work ran late. A family member traveled. Illness kept someone away. And for those evenings, the empty seat spoke louder than the laughter ever did. But the table stayed set. The place remained saved because dinner meant coming home. And the day, no matter how heavy, was never truly complete until that space was honored. Do you remember the little rituals? The bread basket that always arrived first. The way someone insisted on cutting meat before taking the first bite. The argument about who had to clear plates tonight. The fake groans when dishes were assigned and the sink called. Someone always volunteered late after eating slowly on purpose. Someone always slipped away early. Plates stacked unevenly. Leftovers scraped into containers for tomorrow. Glasses settled by the sink with hollow taps. And yet, even as the cleanup began, the feeling lingered, warm, full, safe. Dinner meant coming home. Long after the table was cleared, voices echoed faintly from nearby rooms. The muffled sounds of TV theme songs starting up, homework binders opening, music floating from a radio down the hall, parents talking quietly at the sink while dishes clinked in gentle rhythm. Tired voices, softened by togetherness. And maybe you lingered at the doorway, 2 bites of dessert left in hand, a cookie wrapped in wax paper, a leftover pudding cup, the sweet treat saved for later, watching the scene from the edge, taking it in without knowing you were memorizing it for years to come. Because nobody ever told us childhood memories were being downloaded in real time. We felt the moments, but didn't realize they'd grow priceless later, and somewhere between laughter and passing plates, between saying grace and scraping crumbs, between mom's cooking and dad's tired smile, home wrapped itself around you invisibly. Dinner meant coming home, not to a house exactly, but to belonging, to togetherness, to the simple miracle of bodies gathered around one steady table, sharing food, sharing stories, sharing a single moment of peace in a moving world. So, let me ask you, what dish reminds you most of home? Was there a smell that always pulled you into the dining room before you even knew what was cooking? Who said grace at your table? Tell us in the comments what dinners looked like in your family, whose voice you still hear calling everyone to the table, and if these memories feel like pieces of your own story. If you want to keep walking back through the moments that shaped us, this is exactly what Golden Memory Hour was built for. Subscribe and stay with us, because the journey doesn't end at the dinner table. It continues through the smaller, quieter moments that followed, all the way back to who we were and who we still carry inside. Chapter 10. Evening Wind Down. The way the day always softened toward evening still feels familiar somehow, like the world itself took a deep breath. You could see it happen slowly. The sunlight that had filled the streets with golden noise all afternoon began to slip away, stretching shadows longer down the sidewalks, cooling the air just enough to make you notice. Porch lights flicked on one by one, little warm beacons lining the block like fireflies settling into place. And somewhere, not far off, the first crickets tuned up their nightly chorus, testing the air with tentative chirps that soon became a steady blanket of sound. Did you ever stop outside for a moment before going in? Maybe you sat on the porch steps, book bag still dangling from one shoulder, letting the world quiet itself around you. Your shoes scuffed the wooden boards gently as you shifted your weight, that soft creak beneath your feet telling you that nighttime had officially begun. The porch swing rocked slow and steady. An older neighbor leaned back in a chair across the way, newspaper folded neatly into his lap, nodding as the evening settled around him like a familiar coat. Did you sit out on the porch too? Was there always a moment when you just watched, not wanting the day to end yet, even though you were tired? The sky turned that special blue, the color that seemed to belong only to childhood evenings, not quite dark, not quite light. It was the last glow before stars dared to show themselves. You could hear doors closing one at a time along the block as families called kids inside. Time to come in, homework, wash up for bed, and still you lingered, turning your head to catch the final yells of kids racing bikes toward home, the rattle of chains echoing away, the laugh of a late game finally ending. Life slowed down again. Inside, the house held a different stillness. The table cleared from dinner now became a workspace. School books fanned open across worn wood. Pencils rolled lazily across newspaper-covered surfaces. A desk lamp clicked on, light pooling into a small circle that felt safe somehow, like everything important fit right there. Homework never seemed to take long, at least not in memory. Just spelling words whispered out loud, multiplication tables practiced softly under your breath, careful penmanship attempts erased and redone until letters lined up neatly enough to pass inspection. Did you drag your feet at the table, or were you the kind who raced through it, eager to finish so you could squeeze just a few more moments out of freedom? Maybe your elbows rested on the cool tabletop as you leaned closer to the page, eyes tracing lines of text while your mind drifted far away. Outside the open window floated the sound of crickets and distant traffic, steady, soothing, almost hypnotic. And from another room, the radio murmured, that gentle backdrop of the adult world moving along unchanged. News reports delivered in calm, even voices. Weather forecasts rolling off in numbers and directions that meant little to you then. Occasional swing music played faintly between segments, drifting into the house like a quiet reminder that the day was truly done. Did your parents listen to the radio every night? You might not have paid much attention, but the sound itself became stitched into memory. It meant your home was alive, safe, steady. You were still a child, and the world felt solid beneath your feet. Once homework was done, there seemed to be another soft pause. Time stretching lazily again before bedtime took its final claim. Maybe you sat back on the porch again, now wrapped in a light sweater, pulled tight against the cooling air. The rocking chairs creaked in rhythm like a lullaby for grown-ups. Cicadas buzzed deeper in the trees. A breeze carried newly cut grass or the faint scent of someone's evening cigar drifting from down the street. Neighbors spoke low over fences. Someone laughed. A screen door slammed gently. Streetlights glowed brighter as the sky finally gave in to darkness. Do you remember how calm everything felt? Not loud quiet, but the peaceful kind. The kind that let your shoulders drop without you realizing they had been tense all day. Kids began to yawn. Wide open, unhidden yawns that drew smiles from parents who recognized the signs. Your eyelids grew heavier by the minute, especially if you dared to lean your head against a chairback or porch post. Was bedtime a battle for you? Did you plead for just 10 more minutes? One more chapter of a book? One more radio story? One more plate of popcorn while the grown-ups talked? Or did you quietly accept bedtime, knowing tomorrow would bring another full day to explore? Inside again, the hallway dimmed as lights snapped off one by one. Bathroom sinks ran briefly as teeth were brushed and sleepy faces reflected back in worn mirrors. The towel felt rough against warm skin. The ritual happened like clockwork. Every night, almost the same, yet comforting because of that sameness. Pajamas folded warm from the dryer slipped on easily. A parent poked their head into the room, checking homework stacks, straightening blankets, offering that quiet, familiar smile that said everything was all right. And then the radio turned down. The crickets outside grew louder. The world seemed to lean closer. Did someone come sit on the edge of your bed? Maybe your mother tucked the covers neatly at the corners the same way she always did, pulling them tight across your shoulders until you felt wrapped into place. Or maybe your father lingered at the door just a second longer than necessary, hand resting against the frame, making sure the night felt safe before walking away. Those moments rarely felt special at the time. They were just routine. But now, how heavy they feel with meaning. You lay staring up at the ceiling, shadows from passing headlights drifting across the plaster above. The sounds of your house hummed softly, floorboards settling, a radio switched off, dishes clinking faintly in the kitchen. Every noise felt protective, like the building itself was standing guard through the night. Life was slower then. You drifted between sleep and memory, thinking about the day you lived, the friends you laughed with, the games you almost won, the words you spelled wrong, tiny thoughts sliding away as dreams took over. Tomorrow waited without worry. School again, bus rides, recess and chalkboards and lunch trades. But for now, night had closed gently around childhood. And you were safe inside it. As you listen to these memories, does your own evening ritual come rushing back? Your own porch, your own radio, your own tired little yawn before sleep? Take a moment and share in the comments. Did your nights end with porch time, or calm homework at the table, or radio music playing low in the background? Your stories bring these moments back to life for everyone here at Golden Memory Hour. And if this slow walk through the evenings of childhood feels like home to you, if these quiet moments still echo in your heart, tap subscribe and stay with us, because together we'll keep returning to the memories that never truly fade. Chapter 11. Look how far we've come back then. We didn't know how fast everything would change. We only knew how safe those days felt. You didn't measure time in notifications or calendar reminders. You measured it by the sound of the school bell, the lowering of the sun, the hum of the supper hour starting. Life moved slower, not because days were longer, but because we lived inside them. Morning meant the smell of coffee drifting down the hallway, the newspaper thumping onto the porch, a screen door creaking open to let the day in, no alarms buzzing from a pocket, no glowing rectangles demanding attention, just light, rising gently through curtains, and the quiet comfort of knowing there was nowhere you urgently needed to be. Today, mornings rush past us before we even feel awake. But back then, you felt the morning. And somehow, without planning it, every moment carried weight. Pause for a second. What's the first sound you remember waking up to as a child? Was it your mother calling down the hall? The clatter of dishes in the kitchen? A radio turning on somewhere beyond your bedroom door? Those sounds weren't distractions. They were invitations into the day. Nothing needed to be checked before we lived. We just lived. Shoes went on slowly. Breakfast stretched across the table. Stories were told before the day even began. You remember how time didn't push you forward, it waited for you. School days felt endless but not exhausting. We lingered in moments we didn't know were precious yet. The walk to the bus stop, the chatter of friends before class, the scuffed classroom floors that smelled of chalk dust and pencil shavings. Recess wasn't scheduled exercise, it was freedom. The wind on your face as you ran without purpose, the challenge of climbing higher than yesterday, the echo of laughter drifting across the playground, unfiltered and full. Today, childhood calendars are packed and attention is stretched thin. But then, time's greatest luxury was presence. You were fully where your feet stood. No one filmed childhood. They lived it. After school meant bikes rattling down the street until the sun dipped low, bare knees dusted with dirt, breathless races to the end of the block. And if you were late getting home, no one texted. They simply stood on the porch and waited. Because everyone knew where children went, they wandered outward only to circle safely back home. Dinner wasn't rushed either. The table became the place where the world slowed. Fathers came home still smelling like work. Mothers set down warm plates. Stories from the day unfolded like chapters read aloud. No glowing screen stole the conversation. Just voices, laughter, and gentle disagreements that ended in dessert. Meals lasted as long as stories did. No one checked the time. There was nowhere else worth rushing toward. Think of that. We once lived in a world that didn't beg for our attention because our attention belonged naturally to each other. Evenings unfolded softly. Dishes in the sink, Dad settling into his chair, Mom folding laundry while the radio played. And there it was, the small black and white television glowing like a hearth. Families gathered before it not to escape one another, but to be together around something simple. No rewinds, no cues, no endless scrolling. Miss a show? You missed it. And somehow that made every moment matter more, because there was no pause button on time. Outside, streetlights flickered on like quiet stars. That was the universal signal. Day's over. Come home. No tracking apps, no worry alerts. Just trust, woven tightly through community. Neighbors waved from porches. Parents looked out for children that weren't their own. The whole street felt like one extended family, and safety wasn't measured by locks and cameras. It was measured by familiarity, by knowing the sound of your neighbor's laugh, the shape of the corner bakery sign, the rhythm of your town's footsteps. We moved slower then because nothing told us to move faster, and we didn't confuse stimulation for fulfillment. We didn't need more, we needed less. Less distraction, less noise, less pressure to be everything all at once. What we had was enough. But now, time runs. It doesn't stroll, it sprints. Morning evaporates into schedules. Conversations are cut short by vibrating pockets. Meals blur together in car seats and drive-through bags. We've connected to the world, but quietly drifted from the moment. And that's the strange thing. We've never had more convenience, more technology, more speed, yet we've never felt more hurried. Back then, we didn't know progress would trade our unhurried days for constant urgency. We didn't know life would become something to keep up with instead of something to linger inside. We only knew how safe those days felt. Safe enough to sit on front steps for hours doing nothing. Safe enough to speak without editing ourselves. Safe enough to be bored, because boredom was the doorway to imagination. We dreamed freely, with empty hands and open time. Today, children's dreams are shaped by algorithms. Back then, they were shaped by curiosity, by cardboard boxes becoming spaceships, by sidewalk cracks becoming imaginary borders to leap over, by backyard trees becoming castles. Dreams didn't need batteries, only quiet. Pause here. What did you use to pretend your backyard became? A racetrack? A pirate cove? A cowboy frontier? Nothing we imagined had limits, because no boundaries told us where fantasy stopped. Now, imagination often competes with constant digital noise. Yet even with all that's changed, those memories still live inside us. They become the invisible place we return to when the world feels too loud. Those slower mornings, longer meals, endless summers. They shaped our nervous systems before we had words for it. They taught us calm before we learned chaos. They gave us belonging before we learned urgency. And here's the beautiful truth. What we felt then is still available to us now, not by going backward, but by remembering forward, by slowing the pace of our own days, by letting conversation stretch longer, by turning off the glow when the people around us glow brighter, by relearning how to sit still without guilt. Because maybe the reason nostalgia warms us so deeply isn't just because of what we lost, but because those memories remind us of what we can choose to reclaim. We can choose to live slower moments again, to savor the sound of laughter across a dinner table, to let the evening arrive without rushing to fill it, to tell stories face to face instead of through screens, and to value closeness over convenience. Look how far we've come. But look what we carried with us. The knowledge of how life once felt when time didn't push, attention wasn't stolen, and togetherness came naturally. We didn't know how fast everything would change. We only knew how safe those days felt. And maybe, just maybe, that sense of safety was never about where we lived, but how gently we lived there. Final loop closure. The scent of coffee, warm and familiar, rising softly into the morning air, just like it always did. Before the world hurried, before time felt chased instead of welcomed. There was the hum of the radio drifting through the kitchen, soft announcer voices, gentle music. weather reports spoken calmly, not shouting for attention, simply keeping you company. You sat at the table while the steam curled upward from chipped ceramic cups, watching sunlight crawl across the wall, waiting for the day to begin instead of rushing to catch up to it. And tucked inside those small moments were the beginnings of your story. That classroom with wooden desks etched with names long forgotten, chalk dust hanging softly in the air, windows cracked open just enough to let the breeze move the curtains. The slow scratch of pencils, the shuffle of notebooks, the patient voice of a teacher calling names, each one landing gently across the room like breadcrumbs guiding young lives forward. You remember how your feet barely touched the floor while you sat, how the world felt bigger than you back then. But it didn't feel cold. It felt waiting. That playground, the squeak of swings rising into the sky, the slap of rubber balls against the pavement, the shouts of children chasing the pure joy of motion with no finish line in sight, no stopwatches, no notifications, no highlighted achievements, just laughter marking the hours. Do you remember what the air smelled like at recess? Warm asphalt, fresh-cut grass, autumn leaves crushed beneath running shoes. Your senses stored it all, because those were the only cameras we needed. And then that walk home, the longest walk of the day, yet the most unrushed. Backpack slung loose over one shoulder, kicks of pebbles along the sidewalk, stories about spelling tests and dodgeball victories echoing between friends, corners you knew by heart, each crack in the pavement familiar as handwriting, neighbors calling out greetings from porches, the bark of a dog behind a fence you passed every afternoon, the same mailbox you leaned on while you waited for a friend to catch up. You didn't notice how gentle life felt then, because gentle was normal. And when your house finally came into view, front windows reflecting the afternoon sun, you felt a quiet comfort rise in your chest. I'm home. The door opening with that soft hinge creak, the lingering smell of coffee still in the air somehow. Even in the late afternoon, mixing now with supper beginnings and laundry soap. The radio was still on. It always seemed to be, like a heartbeat inside the home. Those rooms witnessed growing years. Homework at the table, toys scattered across the rug, parents' voices humming from the next room. And later, when evening settled in, the porch steps filled with tired little bodies, waiting for streetlights to flicker awake. Stars blinking faintly overhead, crickets starting their nightly chorus. No plans pulling you away from the moment, just time, wide open, inviting you to sit inside it. And none of us knew, not for a second, how fast everything would change. We didn't know calendars would overflow. We didn't know phones would become clocks, maps, diaries, interruptions. We didn't know evenings would start to feel shorter, conversations briefer, silence rarer. We only knew that back then. Life was slow and safe and kind in its simplicity. Those classrooms taught us more than arithmetic. They taught us patience. Those playgrounds gave us more than exercise. They gave us community. Those walks home gave us something we barely recognize today. Time to think, time to wonder, time to simply be young and unhurried. And every now and then, when the world feels loud, when the days rush by faster than our hearts can keep pace, those moments come whispering back. With the smell of coffee in the morning air, with the hum of a radio in the background, with faint echoes of chalk on blackboards, and the sound of swings cutting arcs through quiet skies. That classroom, those playgrounds, that walk home, they never truly disappeared. They settled into who we became. They shaped the way we long for connection, the way we crave simplicity, the way we recognize peace when it brushes past us. Because even if the world moves faster now, even if the noise never quite fades, deep inside, we still carry the knowledge of how life once felt. Life was slower then, and maybe that's why, whenever we pause, whenever we allow stillness to find us, we recognize it instantly, not as something new, but as something remembered. Before you go, share the school memory you can still see as clear as yesterday. Your stories keep the golden memory hour alive.